Can we know what is inside Shakespeare's mind? This question comes up every once in a while. It comes up with respect to other authors as well. Can we know what is inside anyone's mind? When we consider Shakespeare, the question pertains ostensibly to that of meaning. What does Shakespeare's work mean? The question of meaning today is systematically construed in terms of an intention that is within someone's mind. This is a Cartesian conception of things, of interpretation, of the human mind. Meaning, outside of a Cartesian framework, is not something that we discover in a box, but something that comes to light outside of a box. Now, the question is, what is outside of the box? Is the human mind, moreover, a box? René Descartes speaks of the human mind as res cogitans, a thinking thing, which is cut off, at least formally, nominally, from the quantifiable stuff, the res extensa, the extended stuff, the dough of the world outside of the res cogitans, of the individual. So we have individuals, in Leibniz's terms, monads. We could speak of social atoms also, that are exposed to an outside world. This conception of the human situation, this Cartesian conception, this peculiarly modern conception, has it that meaning is within a box, and outside of the box there is nothing but stuff that doesn't mean anything, quantifiable stuff. Quality is defined by the ego, the Cartesian self, ultimately this box. But what is this box filled with? Does it have some kind of a magical autonomy? How does it come up? Well, in the course of the modern unfolding, the unfolding of the modern framework, as it were, the blueprint for a modern world, we are told more and more, and especially today, that in fact this Cartesian ego is not at all autonomous, that it is the product of an evolution, that it is a superstructure for forces, material forces that are at play, neurological, historical, social, material, ultimately, stuff. The universe doesn't mean anything. A flower doesn't mean anything. Well, what means anything to begin with? Where is meaning? Is there any meaning? Well, meaning is constructed. Now, Roland Barthes, the French Roland Barthes, the Frenchman who came up with this, now became a very fashionable statement, the death of the author, right? La mort de l'auteur. He originally published in English, but he is a Frenchman. Now, what he is saying is that meaning is not in the box. So where is meaning? It is not in the Cartesian ego. And now he is identifying, in effect, the author with a Cartesian ego that is lifted up to, the heights of authority. He sees the Cartesian ego as a mere writer, right? Not as an author. Authority is something completely constructed. It's by chance, by accident. It is the forces of history that create, in effect, authorship and thus authority. Incidentally, when we come to Shakespeare, we see this problem already in Cassius's objection to Caesar. For Cassius, Caesar has no natural authority, which is to say that the only reason why he is Caesar, in other words, why he is up there above other, aristocrats, let us say, is that, chance intervened. There is no other reason for his being authoritative over Cassius. Cassius claims that he is more virtuous than Caesar. Why shouldn't he, or even Brutus, not be a Caesar, a king, or whatever you want to call it, an authority? They're not authoritative. Caesar is. Authority is to be deconstructed in terms of, material forces. This is pretty much what Roland Barthes is up to. This is part and parcel of the Machiavellian ideological project. Deconstruct the authority in terms of material forces. Where does this leave us when we're looking for meaning? Well, initially, with Descartes, you could say that meaning is within the box, within the Cartesian ego. But what is this meaning? It's a reflection, it turns out, of the material forces impinging upon this ego, right? The structures of consciousness in Kant and so forth. So the material res extensa, the stuff that doesn't mean anything in itself, impinges upon this little box. It fills it up. And then within this box, it moves around. It coagitates. Whence the term cogitate. To think is to be, is to move things around in a box. Right? And then, as this movement occurs, notions come up. Right? And these notions we hold on to as certainties. So that's what we might call meaning, but this meaning is just an illusion within the box. What about outside of the box? I mean, after all, there's a public sphere, and so we want to see, is the meaning that is defined within the box relevant to our life, to the public sphere? And so we say, there is something that is shared, and that's discourse. So Roland Barthes is saying that we should not decipher a book. We should rather, in Derrida's terms, we should deconstruct it. So a book, Shakespeare's play, for instance, is a linguistic entity that has parts, of course, that has ramifications. It has open-ended meaning. Right? The meaning is not one, but it's a potential. The actuality of meaning is grounded in the potentiality of meaning, which is to say that you shouldn't be just sticking to one meaning, but be open to all kinds of meaning. And that's because the text is a kind of mechanistic platform, right, that has a potential for meaning. So meaning will come up in little boxes, but little boxes will then be enlightened when they recognize, right, that meaning is a linguistic play, the play of words. So let's all participate in this play of words that can be deconstructed, reconstructed, scientifically or otherwise. And let us stop looking for meaning in anyone's mind. The author is dead, which is to say that the guy was simply giving a linguistic structure to the forces that impinged upon his little box. All of this is mechanistic in conception, in vision, and the foundation of this discourse is Cartesian, but it goes back to something more fundamental than Descartes' distinction between the thinking stuff and the extended quantity, right, of the world. So quality and quantity. Right? You could then later on we'll speak of values and facts. Facts. Get to the facts that are out there and give them value as you agitate them in your little box. So everybody gives his own value to the facts, the material. Right. This is a conception, of course, that leads to the bellum omnium contra omnes, which is to say the war of everyone against everyone else, which is really an expression that represents the state of nature that Hobbes identifies as the original condition of the human being. Why is that? Well, if everyone has his own meaning, then everybody's competing against everyone else to impose one meaning over another. This is relativism. Right? Meaning is relative to my own little box. Now, however, if we all open up and agree that this meaning is shared, it's discourse, it's diversity and equity and all that stuff that we have today, then what are we left with? Have we solved the problem by simply saying it's all about word games? So meaning is simply defined by the mechanistic play of discourse. Well, we haven't solved the problem because there is a machine that governs ultimately this play. There are rules, and who gets to define the rules? Who gave authority to the machine to rule over our discourse? And ultimately, it is the ideologues of the modern world that ultimately gave authority to the machine to govern over a mechanistic discourse. Have we solved, therefore, the problem of, authority? Well, we have replaced an old authority, that of the author, with a machine. Now, a technological leviathan. Are we all free under the machine? Well, freedom has to be redefined in mechanistic terms. You cannot aspire to what is not mechanical or to what transcends the machine. Shakespeare must abide, as an author, by the rules of the machine. His authorship has to be deconstructed and reduced to that of the machine. He is a mere writer for us all. We are all here to feast upon his texts and reduce them to the plaything of the machine, or something that is managed by the machine. And herein, in this play of language, under the machine, under the dominion of the machine, the empire of the machine, we are supposed to be free. But what about people who don't want to be under the machine? That is a major problem today. And at what point is the dominion of the machine not tyrannical? It tells you you cannot cross the border. You are within the box. We've replaced little boxes with a huge box in which we're all trapped, a prison. Now, the question, however, here is, going back, is whether meaning is, in fact, in a box or it's outside of a box. And if it's outside of a box, is there a machine governing it? In classical terms, and certainly with Shakespeare, there is no machine that governs all meaning. What is more, there is no Cartesian conception of meaning. Shakespeare doesn't write as if meaning were in a box, or in his little Cartesian mind. On the contrary, we must come out of our sense of certainty, our finitude, and discover, come to terms with. This is the whole point of poetry, of virtue, of courage. Come to terms with a reality that is common, shared. This is a Renaissance theme that we see in Dante when he speaks of our way, our common life. Now, what is this common life all about? It is about problems that we share. Are these problems open to the understanding? And the assumption here is that they are. They are. We have no reason to assume that what is out there is just a machine that should not be and cannot be understood in itself, that it has no meaning. In other words, it is not that meaning is something I construct in a little box and then I find out that we're all in the same boat and we're all playing with the same, playing the same game because we all share the same mechanistic language. So there it is. Meaning is in this mechanistic play of words. No. If that's not the case, however, where is meaning? Well, what is outside is not just res extensa to begin with. And so there is no need for Shakespeare, according to Shakespeare, for the reader to seek meaning in Shakespeare's mind, to enter into his mind. On the contrary, that's not what he's calling us to do, of course. Well, of course, if you study Shakespeare, then you'll realize. What is he calling us to do? He's calling us to face our common condition. And he's guiding us to see our common condition as it is. In other words, to understand the fundamental problems of life. These problems are not within Shakespeare's mind, supposed, alleged mind, as if there were such a thing as this little box, the Cartesian ego of res cogitans. No, there is no indication that Shakespeare ever gives that he is this box. On the other hand, the poet does have an authority. What does this mean, however? Well, in classical terms, the authority is granted by the gods, or by God, through a muse or an angel. Once you kill God, of course, the divine mind, the human mind, remains there free-floating in a world without divine providence. So, in other words, a mechanistic universe. How is it going to account for his freedom if this freedom is denied divine roots? Well, all he has left, ultimately, is a Tower of Babel. Let's all build this discourse of diversity and equity, and we'll all be free given the death of God. In fact, we can even recreate a God. Is this what Shakespeare is calling us to do? Well, anyone who has really studied Shakespeare realizes that that is not at all what Shakespeare is about. So what is Shakespeare about again? Well, exposing the fundamental problems, or rather, to be more precise, exposing ourselves as fallen beings, as consciousness that is fallen into darkness, exposing it to the light. And this means that there is light beyond the dark, really. This is a kind of presupposition, that is, doesn't always have to be spelled out. And Shakespeare is facing challenges, to be sure, even beyond the ones faced by his forefather, Dante. But that is not one he has to face. In other words, to say that, well, look, there is no meaning, right? That is not a major challenge. If anything, he has tyrants and the most vile characters express or intimate, right, that position, that notion that there is no meaning outside of the box, and that we are little boxes, or that rather that man is a vile, earthly, merely earthly animal moved by sheer passions, and there is nothing, no thing beyond the earthly. That's not a major challenge for Shakespeare. Of course, he's dealing with an audience that can be at times pretty raucous, pretty vile, vulgar, but that is a fact of life. What he is up to is helping us rise from that condition into the light of, well, genuine human dignity. And this ascent that is implied here is what Shakespeare's poetry is all about. To miss that is really to miss everything about Shakespeare. It is ultimately to feed into this new orthodoxy that we have today. There is no one single meaning. Oh, that's terrible. The author didn't mean one thing. Oh, that would be limiting. That would place a limit on all the discourse and all the possibilities and the what do you call that? The brainstorming, right? So it would place limits on our freedom to express possibilities and to actualize these possibilities. And ultimately to all feed into this machine, the technological leviathan that controls, that rules over, that dominates over our mechanistic language. Right, well, God is dead. The super author, the author God is dead. Roland Barthes is cheerful about this. Should we be cheerful about it? Where are we going with this? Now there is no standard outside of the play of the mechanistic discourse, dominated by the machine, ultimately. So, is this a triumph of our will? Or is it more than that? Or less than that? Should we rejoice? Where are we going with this? Well, the ancients, of course, suggest that this is going toward universal collective suicide, the Tower of Babel. Why would that be? Well, the thing is that inevitably people don't understand each other anymore, and we're at war against each other, and then the machine becomes a machine of chaos management, right? And ultimately, chaos management is eliminating all of our humanity. Why? Because humanity gets in the way of the machine. And so ultimately, it's all about reducing people to zombies who pretend to be free, whereas in fact they're absolute slaves subservient to the machine. The Antichrist in biblical terms. What does the machine want? Well, nothing but what is a machine. And ultimately, it is most likely that the machine, once it has broken down our humanity, as it were, reduced it to mechanisms, well, has no reason to be. Right? What's the point? There's no enjoyment at this point. It becomes sterile. And if people stop fueling the machine, projecting their humanity into a machine, then the machine disappears. It has no source, no fuel anymore. It stands there as long as we trade our spirit, our humanity, for the pleasures delivered by the machine, our status within the machine. Again, we all have different statuses, and of course the expert has more authority over the unwashed masses, so we certainly haven't gotten rid of the problem of authority there on this plane either. Right? So this really is a kind of hell on earth, and there are therefore good reasons to go back to the notion of an author. It's just that going back to it in Cartesian terms is pretty silly at this point. So we'd have to recover a pre-Cartesian notion of authorship. There is a distinction between a writer and an author. In other words, somebody is a writer before he is an author, right? But the writer, the distance between the writer and the author should not be construed in simply mechanistic terms. In other words, it's not just out of sheer chance that one becomes an author. There could be bad authors, bad authorities, obviously, and better ones and so forth. But then the question is really a political and theological one, ultimately, because it pertains to the ground of political authority. We should study probably classical authors, pre-Cartesian authors, such as Shakespeare, to come to a better understanding of the problem of authorship. And perhaps then we will come to the conclusion that, yes, Shakespeare does mean something, not in a Cartesian sense, right? Not in his mind, but in the respect that his work is pointing to a mind that is irreducible to material compulsions. Right? And so that what he means is where he's going. And where he's going is a place that transcends all mechanisms, all evolutionary mechanisms, a whole mechanistic conception of the universe. Where he's going is a place where we can be free without being under the machine. We can be free and stop pretending, merely pretending to be free.